The Duggar family had always been known for their perfect image, a home built on prayer, discipline, and faith. Inside their big white house in Arkansas, Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar had raised 19 children with one goal: to follow God's path and keep their family pure and united. The world saw them as the perfect Christian family, smiling faces, matching outfits, and morning prayers that filled the halls. But what no one saw was the silent pain growing behind that perfection. Among all the Duggar children, Josie Duggar was the one who carried the most love from her parents. Born dangerously premature, she had survived against all odds. Every breath she took was considered a miracle. Michelle often said, "Josie is proof that God still performs miracles." But miracles don't last forever. And sometimes, the child who was saved ends up losing herself in the darkness she was never prepared to face. As Josie grew up, she was different from her siblings. While others followed the family's rules, Josie questioned them. She didn't understand why she couldn't go to public school, why she had to dress a certain way, or why the family's image mattered more than their feelings. Her siblings called her stubborn. Michelle called her lost. But Josie called herself trapped. Every morning began the same way. The sound of Michelle's voice calling everyone for family prayer. "Time for Bible reading," she'd say with a smile. Josie would drag herself out of bed, eyes half open, mind somewhere else. She didn't feel God the way her parents did. She didn't feel the peace they talked about. All she felt was pressure, to smile, to behave, to never question. By the time she turned 16, that pressure began to break her. She started to sneak out of the house after dark, meeting a group of friends she'd met online, kids from nearby towns who lived freely, without rules. They introduced her to a world she'd never known: music, laughter, freedom, and eventually pills. At first, it was just one. A small white pill handed to her by a friend. "Try it, Josie. You'll feel like you can breathe again," they said. And for the first time, Josie did feel free. No fear, no judgment, no expectations. She laughed, danced, and forgot who she was supposed to be. But freedom turned into dependence faster than she realized. The nights grew longer, the lies bigger, and the guilt unbearable. To keep her secret, Josie started taking small amounts of money from her father's office. Just a few dollars at first, then more. She told herself she'd return it someday. But she never did. Weeks turned into months. Michelle noticed Josie's eyes, tired, distant, empty. Jana Duggar, the eldest sister, tried to talk to her, but Josie always avoided her. "I'm fine," she'd say, forcing a smile. But her hands shook, and her heart raced. Inside, she was falling apart. Then came the day that changed everything. Jim Bob had planned a family dinner. Everyone was home, including the married daughters and their husbands. The table was full of laughter and food, just like the old days. But Josie couldn't enjoy it. Her body ached. Her mind screamed for another dose. When everyone went to pray before eating, Josie quietly slipped away and went to her father's office. She opened the drawer, the one that held emergency cash, and took a handful of bills. She was about to leave when she heard footsteps. It was Jana. "Josie, what are you doing?" Jana's voice was soft but sharp. Josie froze, her heart pounding. I was just looking for something," she whispered. Jana stepped closer, her eyes filled with worry. "Josie, are you okay?" But Josie couldn't answer. She pushed past her sister and ran upstairs. That night, Jana couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. She walked into Josie's room quietly, the moonlight spilling across the floor. That's when she saw it, a small brown bag under the bed. When she pulled it out, her world shattered. Inside were rolled dollar bills, half-empty pill bottles, and a lighter. Tears filled her eyes as she clutched the bag and whispered, "Oh, Josie." The next morning, the entire family was called into the living room. The air was heavy, the room silent. Josie sat at the edge of the couch, her head down. Jim Bob stood in front of her, holding the brown bag. His voice trembled. "Josie, where did this come from?" Josie didn't answer. Her fingers shook, eyes red from sleepless nights. Michelle broke down crying. "Sweetheart, please tell us this isn't true." Finally, Josie whispered, "It's mine." Gasps filled the room. Jana covered her mouth. Jim Bob's face turned pale. "You stole from us, and you used this?" "Why, Josie, We gave you everything. Josie looked up, tears streaming down her cheeks. You gave me rules, not love. You gave me faith, not freedom. Her voice echoed through the house. Michelle fell to her knees, sobbing. Jim Bob couldn't speak. The other siblings stared in disbelief. For the first time, the perfect Duggar image cracked. That night, Josie sat in her room alone, staring at her reflection. Her mascara had run down her cheeks, her eyes hollow. The sound of her mother crying downstairs echoed in her ears. She knew she couldn't stay. Not anymore. She packed a few clothes, some money, and one photo. A picture of her as a baby in Michelle's arms. At midnight, she opened the front door slowly. The cold wind hit her face. She looked back once. The house stood silent, a symbol of everything she had lost. Then she stepped into the darkness, disappearing into the night. The next morning, Michelle woke up and found Josie's room empty. The bed unmade, the window open. On the table, there was a small note. Don't look for me. I need to find myself. And that was the night the Duggar family's world fell apart. The night their miracle child became their biggest heartbreak. The night Josie left her home was cold and silent. The Arkansas sky was heavy with clouds, and the streets glowed faintly under the pale orange light of street lamps. She walked barefoot for a while, clutching her small backpack tightly. The world felt different outside the walls of her home, vast, free, and terrifying. For the first time in her life, there were no rules. No family prayers. No curfews. No one watching her. Just silence and freedom. But freedom, she was about to learn, could be the most dangerous prison of all. She found temporary shelter in an old bus station outside Fayetteville. The benches were cold, and the smell of smoke and gasoline filled the air. A group of strangers sat nearby, young people lost like her. One of them, a girl with pink hair and tired eyes, offered her a cigarette. You look new here, she said, half smiling. Josie hesitated, then took it. The smoke burned her throat, but she didn't care. For the first time, someone wasn't judging her. Someone wasn't telling her what God wanted her to do. She felt seen. The girl's name was Mara, and she introduced Josie to a small group that lived on the edge of town. Squatters, drifters, addicts. They shared food, money, and drugs. Josie didn't know them well, but they became her new family. At night, they'd sit around a fire behind an abandoned warehouse, talking about broken families, lost dreams, and the pain they were trying to forget. Josie would often stare into the flames, remembering her mother's voice singing lullabies, her father's Bible readings, her siblings laughing. She missed them, but she also hated the shame she'd caused. She told herself she could never go back. Not after what she'd done. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Josie's addiction deepened. She stopped caring about the world around her. Her once shiny hair turned dull, her bright eyes dimmed. The girl who had been called a miracle now looked like a ghost. Back home, the Duggar house was drowning in sadness. Michelle sat in Josie's empty room every night, clutching her daughter's baby blanket, whispering prayers through her tears. God, please bring her back to me. Keep her safe. Please. Jim Bob grew quieter, guilt eating him alive. He spent nights driving through nearby towns, putting up missing posters, asking strangers if they'd seen a young girl with brown hair and a sweet face. Every time he came home empty-handed, he'd sit in his car, staring at the photo of Josie as a child. The tiny baby he'd once held so carefully in the NICU. Where did I lose you? He'd whisper. Meanwhile, Josie's new world was getting darker. Mara introduced her to stronger drugs. Things that made her forget everything. Even her own name. One night, Josie collapsed in the middle of the street after taking too much. She woke up in a hospital with a nurse standing beside her, checking her pulse. Josie Duggar? The nurse asked, reading from the ID found in her bag. You're a Duggar, aren't you? From TV. Josie's eyes filled with tears. Please don't tell them, she whispered. But the nurse already had. Within hours, Michelle got a call from the hospital. Her hands trembled as she picked up the phone. When she heard Josie's name, she fell to the floor, sobbing with relief and fear. She's alive, she cried out to Jim Bob. But she's in bad shape. We have to go. They drove through the night, hearts pounding, praying that this time they wouldn't lose her again. When they reached the hospital, Josie was sitting by the window, pale and frail, a and 4 in her arm. Michelle ran to her, tears streaming down her face. "Sweetheart, I'm here. I'm here." But Josie didn't look at her. Her eyes were distant, ashamed. "You shouldn't have come," she said softly. Jim Bob stepped forward, voice breaking. "We're your parents. We'll always come for you." Josie turned her face away, whispering, "You don't know me anymore." Michelle broke down. She tried to touch her daughter's hand, but Josie pulled it away. "I'm not your miracle anymore," she said through tears. The words cut like a knife. The doctors told the Duggars that Josie needed rehab, badly. Her body was weak, her mind unstable. Michelle wanted to bring her home, but Josie refused. "If I go back there, I'll fall apart again. I need to be somewhere real." Jim Bob agreed to help pay for a recovery center in Little Rock. As Josie was transferred there, Michelle hugged her tightly. "I don't care where you are, Josie. I just want you alive. Please promise me that." Josie nodded, barely whispering, "I'll try." In rehab, Josie faced the hardest months of her life. She shook, cried, screamed, and tried to run away multiple times. The pain of withdrawal broke her body, but the memories broke her soul even more. Each night, she'd see visions of her family. Jana's eyes filled with tears, her father's disappointed silence, her mother's trembling hands. She wanted to forget them, but she couldn't. One night, during a group therapy session, the counselor asked everyone to write a letter to someone they had hurt. Josie stared at the blank paper for hours before finally writing, "Dear Mom and Dad, I'm sorry I broke your hearts. I'm sorry I stole from you, lied to you, and ran away. But I had to run. Not from you, but from who I was becoming. I didn't want to be perfect anymore. I just wanted to be me. Please forgive me. I still love you, Josie." The counselor mailed the letter. When Michelle received it, she held it to her chest and cried for hours. "She's coming back," she whispered. "I know she is." Back at the rehab center, Josie took small steps toward healing. She joined morning prayer sessions again, this time by choice. She learned to play guitar, wrote songs about pain and forgiveness, and slowly began to find herself beyond the Duggar image, beyond perfection. But deep down she knew, healing was just beginning. The road ahead would be long, full of temptations and regret. And even though she was learning to stand again, part of her feared. What if her family could never see her as the same Josie again? The camera fades out on Josie sitting on her rehab bed, staring at a photo of her family taped to the wall. She whispers softly, "One day, I'll come home." 6 months had passed since Josie entered the rehab center in Little Rock. The seasons had changed. Winter's harsh cold had melted into the gentle warmth of spring. Trees were blooming outside her window, the same way her soul was slowly beginning to heal. For the first time in years, Josie woke up without needing pills to survive. Her mornings began with soft sunlight filtering through the curtains, the sound of birds, and the quiet whisper of her own heartbeat. Alive, steady, real. The rehab staff often said she was one of the strongest girls they had seen. But Josie knew the truth. Strength didn't come easy. It came from breaking down again and again until all that remained was the will to rise. Her counselor, Dr. Helen Moore, became like a second mother to her. "Josie," she said one morning, "forgiveness isn't about forgetting what you've done. It's about learning to love the person you're becoming." Josie smiled weakly. "But what if my family never sees that person?" Dr. Moore placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then show them. Not through words, through the life you live now." Those words stayed with Josie. Every day she worked harder, attending therapy, painting during art sessions, playing her guitar during recovery group. She even began to talk openly about her addiction, sharing her story with newcomers who had lost hope. "If I can survive it, you can too," she'd say softly, her eyes shimmering with sincerity. But while Josie was healing inside, the world outside was changing too. And not in a kind way. News had spread across social media and tabloids. Duggar daughter in drug rehab, the dark secret of the Duggar family. Josie Duggar's fall from grace. TV shows and gossip blogs turned her pain into headlines. Michelle stopped watching television altogether. Every cruel comment was like a stab to her heart. Jim Bob tried to protect the family's image, but deep down he knew, this wasn't about reputation anymore. It was about saving their daughter. One afternoon, Josie was called to the office. "Your parents are here," Dr. Moore said with a gentle smile. Josie froze. It had been months since she'd last seen them. Her hands trembled as she walked down the hall. When she entered the visitor's room, Michelle stood up instantly. Her eyes were red but full of love. "Josie," she whispered. Josie hesitated, then slowly walked forward. Michelle wrapped her arms around her daughter and didn't let go. No words, no judgment, just tears, forgiveness, and a mother's heartbeat. Jim Bob stood a few feet away, quiet, watching them. His eyes glistened. "We've missed you so much," he said finally. Josie turned to him, unsure if she could face his disappointment. But instead, she saw something different: softness, humility, maybe even guilt. "I missed you too, Dad," she said, voice breaking. They sat together for hours, talking about small things at first: the garden, Jana's new baby, Joanna's upcoming anniversary. Slowly they touched on deeper things. "I know I hurt you," Josie said. "I can't undo that." Jim Bob nodded. "We all make mistakes, Josie. What matters is that you came back." Michelle took her daughter's hand. "We don't care about the cameras, the gossip, or what people say. You're our daughter. That's what matters." For the first time in a long time, Josie smiled without pain. That night, she went back to her room, sat on her bed, and wrote in her recovery journal, "Today I saw love, not the perfect kind, but the real kind. The kind that forgives, even when it hurts. Maybe I can start again." 3 more months passed, and Josie finally completed her rehabilitation program. On her last day, the staff gathered around as she received her recovery certificate. She stood in front of the group and spoke softly, her voice trembling but steady. "I thought I lost my life, but I just lost myself for a while. Thank you for helping me find who I am again." Everyone clapped. Even Dr. Moore wiped a tear. Michelle and Jim Bob were there too, proud, emotional, hopeful. When Josie walked out of the center's gates, she felt the wind hit her face, the same wind she had felt the night she ran away. But this time it didn't feel cold. It felt like home. As they drove back to the Duggar house, Josie looked out the window. Fields, churches, familiar roads. She whispered to herself, "I'm ready." When they arrived home, all her siblings were waiting. Jana hugged her first, crying openly. "I never stopped praying for you," she said. Josie laughed through her tears. "You never gave up on me, did you?" "Never," Jana said, smiling. Even the younger siblings, who barely understood what had happened, ran to hug her. The house that once felt broken now echoed again with laughter, tears, and hope. That night, the family gathered for dinner. The first full meal together in almost a year. Jim Bob led the prayer. "Lord, thank you for giving us back our daughter. Thank you for teaching us that love is greater than fear, and that grace is stronger than shame." Everyone said amen. Josie looked around, her family smiling, holding hands, united. For the first time in years she felt peace. But peace doesn't last long in the spotlight. The next morning, Josie woke up to find news vans parked outside the house. Reporters shouting questions. Cameras flashing. "Josie, how does it feel to be home? Did the Duggars force you into rehab? Are you planning to speak publicly?" Jim Bob tried to push them away, but the story had spread too far. The world wanted a scandal, not redemption. Josie stood at the window, tears in her eyes. "They don't want the truth," she whispered. "They just want a story." That day, she made a decision that would change everything again. She told her parents, "If I don't speak for myself, others will speak for me." Michelle looked worried. "The media can be cruel, Josie." "I know," Josie said softly, "but maybe my voice can help someone else." The next week, Josie sat in front of a camera. Not for a TV show, not for fame, but for healing. She shared everything: her pain, her addiction, her mistakes, and her journey. She spoke with honesty and grace. "I'm not perfect," she said, "but I'm alive. And that's enough." The video went viral. Millions watched. Some judged, some criticized, but many cried and thanked her for her courage. Messages poured in from around the world. "You gave me hope. You made me believe recovery is possible." For the first time, Josie wasn't hiding. She wasn't pretending to be the perfect Duggar daughter. She was simply herself, flawed, forgiven, and free. That night, Michelle found Josie sitting on the porch, looking up at the stars. "Proud of you," she whispered. Josie smiled. "You know what's crazy, Mom? For the first time, I don't feel lost anymore." Michelle hugged her gently. "That's because you finally came home. Not just to us, but to yourself." The camera zooms out. The Duggar house glowing softly under the night sky, laughter echoing inside, the sound of healing whispering through the wind. The video that Josie recorded in her family's living room spread across the internet faster than anyone expected. Within days, millions of views turned into millions of opinions. Some people called her brave. Others called her a disgrace to her faith. Every headline carried her name again. Only this time it wasn't about her fall, but about her fight to stand up. At first, the Duggar home filled with new energy. Support letters arrived by mail. Strangers wrote about their own recoveries. Josie read them at the kitchen table, her eyes lighting up with quiet pride. "Maybe my story can save someone else," she whispered to Jana. But with light came shadows. Producers called with offers for interviews and documentaries. Talk shows wanted her on air. A Christian magazine offered to pay for her testimony, but only if she allowed them to edit it, to fit their audience. Josie hesitated. She wanted to speak, not be shaped again. Jim Bob was torn. "Sweetheart, the world isn't kind. The more you talk, the more they'll twist your words." Josie looked at him gently. "Dad, hiding almost killed me once. I can't do that again." So she began visiting churches, youth centers, and recovery shelters. She spoke without a script, raw, honest, shaking sometimes, but people listened. She talked about faith that survives failure, about forgiveness that starts with yourself. Each time she finished, someone in the crowd cried, someone came forward and said, "Me too." Yet fame is a double-edged sword. Reporters followed her to airports. Paparazzi hid near the rehab center she still attended for aftercare. When a photo of her buying medication leaked online, tabloids shouted, "Josie relapses?" It wasn't true, she had been buying vitamins, but damage spreads faster than truth. She locked herself in her room, scrolling through hateful comments until her eyes blurred. "Maybe I shouldn't have spoken," she whispered. Michelle came in quietly, sitting beside her. "The world doesn't understand healing, Josie. They only see headlines. But you keep walking your road. Let your truth outlast their noise." The Faith Conference. A few months later, Josie was invited to speak at a national faith and recovery conference in Nashville. It was the biggest stage of her life. On the morning of the event, she stood behind the curtain, hands trembling. Backstage lights glowed warm on her face. She looked out at the audience. Pastors, counselors, young addicts, parents, all waiting. She began slowly. "I grew up believing perfection was proof of faith. But I learned that faith is strongest when everything breaks." Her voice shook, but she kept going. "I stole from my family, I ran away, I nearly lost my life. But grace followed me, even into the darkest streets. And if grace can find me, it can find you." When she finished, the crowd stood. Applause rolled like thunder. Jim Bob and Michelle sat in the front row, holding hands, tears streaming down their faces. Jana cried openly. For the first time, Josie didn't feel shame standing on a stage. She felt purpose. The night of the storm. That same night, on the drive home, rain poured hard. The windshield blurred, headlights flashed, and sirens screamed somewhere in the distance. Josie stared out the window, thinking about everything. The applause, the pain, the price of being known. "Mom," she said quietly, "do you think people will ever stop seeing me as the broken Duggar?" Michelle smiled through the mirror. "Maybe not. But one day, they'll see you as the girl who refused to stay broken." Suddenly, the car ahead skidded. Tires screeched. Jim Bob swerved just in time. The world spun for a heartbeat, then silence. They pulled over, shaken but safe. Josie exhaled, her heart pounding. In that instant, she realized how fragile every moment still was. She reached for her parents' hands. "I love you both. No cameras, no stages, just this. I don't ever want to forget it." The storm outside began to ease. A year later, a full year passed. The Duggar house was quieter now, softer. Life had found a gentler rhythm. Josie worked at a local outreach center, counseling teens struggling with addiction. She no longer hid from the world, but no longer chased it either. Each morning she brewed coffee for Michelle, helped Jim Bob in the garden, and spent afternoons writing music. One song, Broken Faith, became a viral anthem online. Its lyrics said, "I fell from grace, but grace was waiting. I lost my way, but love kept chasing. Broken faith still finds the light, because broken doesn't mean goodbye." The song touched thousands. Messages arrived again, but this time they were different. Gentle, grateful, full of hope. Josie realized something. Her pain had become her ministry. The final scene. One evening, the whole family gathered outside for a backyard dinner. String lights glowed over the table. Laughter mixed with crickets. Jana played guitar softly as Josie sang the chorus of her song. When she finished, silence lingered. Beautiful, peaceful. Jim Bob raised his glass of sweet tea. "To Grace," he said. Michelle added softly. "And to never giving up on the ones we love." Josie smiled, eyes shining in the candlelight. "And to learning that perfection isn't the goal. Peace is." The camera pulls back slowly. The Duggar house glowing beneath the sunset. A family once broken now whole in a new way. Their laughter echoing through the Arkansas hills. Years passed and the Duggar family found a new rhythm in life. One shaped not by perfection or image, but by understanding, forgiveness and love. Josie Duggar, once the family's miracle child who had fallen into addiction and darkness, had transformed into a symbol of resilience and hope. The scars of her past remained, not as marks of shame, but as reminders of the battles she had fought and survived. She carried those memories like a quiet strength, a guide that kept her grounded and compassionate. Josie devoted herself to helping others who struggled with addiction, trauma, and the pressure of expectation. Her journey had shown her the devastating cost of silence, judgment, and hidden pain, and she vowed to be a voice for those who had no one to listen. Through her outreach, her mentorship, and her music, she reached countless individuals, teaching them that falling did not mean failure, and that recovery was not just possible, it was a journey worth embracing. People from all walks of life connected with her story, finding solace and courage in her honesty and vulnerability. Back home, the Duggar family continued to navigate their lives with a renewed sense of humility. Jim Bob and Michelle had learned to place love above control, faith above judgment. The house that had once felt like a prison of expectations became a sanctuary of acceptance, where mistakes could be acknowledged, forgiveness could flow, and growth could be nurtured. Every family gathering carried an understanding that life was fragile, precious, and unpredictable, and that each member's journey, no matter how difficult, deserved patience and compassion. Despite the lingering presence of public scrutiny, Josie no longer defined herself by the world's opinions. She had learned to filter the noise, to embrace her own truth, and to stand firmly in the knowledge that her value was not measured by mistakes but by resilience, love, and the courage to continue forward. The pain of betrayal, the weight of addiction, and the isolation of shame were still memories she carried, but they no longer controlled her. They were chapters of a story that she now narrated with grace and authenticity, inspiring others to confront their own struggles without fear. In the quiet moments, when Josie reflected on her past, she felt a deep, abiding sense of gratitude, for survival, for forgiveness, and for the unwavering love that had guided her home. She understood that redemption was not a single act, but a lifetime of choices, of learning to rise each time she fell. Through the journey of darkness and back into light, she discovered that healing was not about erasing mistakes, but about embracing them as part of the path toward wholeness. Ultimately, Josie Duggar's story was one of transformation, resilience, and the enduring power of love. It was a testament to the strength that exists within every individual, even when circumstances seem insurmountable. Her life became a living reminder that the shadows of the past do not have to define the future, and that the courage to face one's demons with honesty and heart can illuminate the way for oneself and countless others. The Duggar family, once fractured by secrets and sorrow, had emerged stronger, wiser, and united, carrying forward a legacy not of perfection, but of humanity, grace, and the unbreakable bond of family. And in that enduring light, Josie walked forward, whole, healed, and finally free.